Hello. Hi. So today we're going to do a tutorial of the basics of Enscape. So this is really just a walkthrough of the locations of the buttons, what the buttons do, um, and then some simple settings for for a render. Okay. Notice that I already have a, a model in here. Okay, so I've already gone through and kind of set up some basic structure um, with roof, walls, glass, floor, and structure, right? Um, and notice I also already have some materials in here. Okay, so we'll talk through that in a later lesson as to how to do that. But for today, we're just going to understand Enscape. Okay, so those are kind of givens. All right, so let's go to our tab here. It says Enscape capturing. Okay, that's this one right here. And then right below that is the Enscape um, uh, interface with the start button, um, the, the live views. Um, here is the synchronization between a picture, what you have here, and your Enscape view. And anyways, we'll go through these. I think it's better we'll just walk through them. So if you don't have this ribbon, if you've downloaded Enscape and you're not seeing this, um, what you can do is you can right click on your tab here, your toolbar, and you can go to show toolbar. Okay, and if you just kind of scroll down, you'll see that there should be Enscape capturing and Enscape. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure why I have two uh, versions of the same capturing. You should just need one. Okay, so you have Enscape and then Enscape capturing. Go back up and take a look. Yeah, okay, so with those two checked, then I should see my my Enscape capturing bar and my Enscape interface bar. Okay, yeah, he created a duplicate. So if it comes up like that, um, you can just move him to your, I'll click on this. Okay, you see he comes up here. You can just select that toolbar and either move him up to this tab or move him below here. Um, but once you do that, then you can also shift him and if you have two like me, you can delete them. Okay, so once you have your toolbars, now you're kind of ready to take on Enscape. So with something modeled here, I'm going to assume you have something, even just if it's a box, right? You go over, you draw your box, and and then we have something to model. Okay, because you'll need to see it. So I'm going to press this first button right here that's called the Enscape Start command. I can also type it in, Enscape, if I can spell, Start command. Okay, they both will do the same thing where we start the render process. And if you've used other software for rendering, such as V-Ray or even 3D Studio Max or anything that's not a live time renderer, the nice thing about Enscape is this is the long process, right? Just the startup. Once it gets started up, then you have a live feed. So um, this is what your window will look like. Okay, so you'll probably have some default sky. You'll have some nice uh, basic ground here. If you right click, you can orbit your model. Okay, and you should click on the actual uh, geometry. Okay, to orbit about it. Notice if I click over here, I'm trying to right click off in my no man's land. it won't do anything. So I have to right click on the model for the camera to know which location to orient itself about. Okay, so that's how we orbit. Um, if we hold the I guess the middle, what is this? It's not the left and it's not the right. It's that middle part of your mouse that I don't know, the pinwheel, I guess, the mouse wheel. If you click that, what you can do is you can pan, okay? Pan back and forth. Right clicks orbits, that mouse wheel pans, and then um, click is just general orbit, okay? Let's left click. So down here will also, this little key bar will also help you through these commands. You can keep it on while you're working in the render to try to remind yourself how to move in this space. If we scroll in, scroll out, it's pretty obvious. But uh, for instance, here we have our kind of more walking moves where we can pan to the left, okay, and then we can pan to the right using D, okay, A, D. If you use a W, we'll move forward. If you move S, you'll move back. If you move E, the camera will move up in Z space, right? And Q, the camera will move down. Okay, seems pretty easy. So once you get that, then you can, if it's too slow for you, you have this here, you can see it says fast. So if you hold shift and do these, it will move you quickly. Okay, so this is if you're really trying to find a view in a very big building and you're, zooming from very far away. Okay, or you're just impatient. That's fine too. Okay, but that's the quick command. Okay. So in an even faster, you can hold control. So I don't actually do that one much because it's almost too quick. You see that? But that's for super fast. Okay, we want to, um, what is it, fly or walk, we can press the space. Okay, you can also press the space to orient yourself to eye level view. And I don't know why mine's set up. It should be on 0, 0, so I'm not sure why it's not doing that. Okay, and then these other ones we won't talk about. Okay, they're not really necessary for right now. Okay, so that's just getting the camera view set up. And if you want to hide this toolbar, if it's distracting, you can just click H and that will hide it. If you want to bring it back, press H again. Simple enough. Okay, so then the other part of this is to shift to control the environment. Okay, so that's the camera. Then there's the second part, which is the environment. So you have your sky, you have your ground, you have everything that's around it. So so let's take a look at that. If we minimize this, okay. No, just pan this over here. There we go. Okay. So if we have our render set up here. Okay, H hide. And I go back to my toolbar here in Rhino space, and I look at these next buttons. Okay, so I have this button will enable live updates. Okay, so I can click that, and then I can free model here without any updates to my Enscape space. If I click this, what that will do is that will now create whatever geometry I have in this space. So as I start to move this and adjust this, my Enscape will update automatically. I'm going to make this even smaller so that I have, so we can actually see both at the same time. Problem with the duplicate windows is it doesn't want to, there we go. We don't need it so big, but we just want to see it as it updates. So you can see here how that has that live updates. And then if I click this button again, it says live updates false, and I start to move these things, it no longer, will update. Delete that and then press this again, and it goes away. Okay, so the next couple buttons are, I guess we're still on views, aren't we? Because these are all view setups. So we have this one will synchronize view. So whatever I do in my Rhino space will update here automatically in Enscape. Okay. If I click that off, it says false, and then my view is now back to just Enscape control. This next one is named views. So what I can do is I can set up a view either in Rhino or in Enscape, but I can save that view. So I can save the view for under named views, right? We have, remember that, we can go to settings. We can go to named views and see this. If this is checked, then we'll see this interface. And we can start to set up views here, save them, give them a name, and then once that's named, we can click on these later, and that same named view will be set up for us. Okay, so that we can keep rendering the same exact geometry and camera view, and not worry about any discrepancies. If we have a Photoshop file set up for post-processing, this ensures that that geometry will be in the same location. So that's for the Rhino setup of a named view. And then in Enscape, we can do a similar thing where if we set up a view here, we can use this create a named view, okay, to create an Enscape view. And then once I do that, it will add on to my named views setting. So I can actually go to that same view now in Rhino space, and get the same camera and setup and everything. Okay, so that's to create the view in Enscape space, but then this tab will allow you to set up um, your Enscape view to any of these named views. Okay, so you'll see the same names here as the named view list. So I click on this, my camera will update so that it's it's taking that frame in that camera and everything. So it's quite a nice list. The problem is if you click out of it, you have to remember to go, you always have to go back to it. It doesn't just keep this window up for you. Okay. So those are these camera settings, and then this is the a VR hookup. So if you have Oculus Rift or any of these other virtual reality goggles and software, so you can hook that up and walk through your model. Okay. And then here, this is an asset library. So this is if you wanted to, if we click on this, it takes a little bit to load. But this is really if you wanted to add any other model geometry or model information to your project. So obviously we have a number of different items here, but probably the most popular is vegetation, where you can add trees and shrubs. You can see here ground cover. This is probably one of the quickest ways that you can add vegetation to your model. Okay, so if we take a look here, notice there's leaves. There's a whole bunch of extra accessories that you can add to give your model some flair. Okay, so if you grab one of these, you can so just grab one of them. Okay, notice it says asset placement. Select the target surface. Okay, so I would probably pick my floor. Let's put my layers on. Oh, my floor is locked. Okay, unlock my floor. If I click that, now if if I choose a location here, um, it should place that shrub here. And you can see that now live update in the model. Notice it appears very rigid and tessellated, sort of, right, for this. But then in the model, you get this very nice appearance of a live, beautiful fern. And that's the beauty of a proxy. Okay, so it's approximating the geometry in our Rhino space using meshes, but then there's an image that's built into this model that has a three-dimensional quality with all of the materials attached. It makes your life much easier as a designer if all you have to do is, for the vegetation, is grab one of these and not have to worry about um, photoshopping this later, right? Because that's the old school way, is to, that's the way I did it, was you had to Photoshop these things after and kind of just fuzzy in the landscape, because you're not designing that as much, right? You're designing the architecture, so it makes sense that you pay attention to that. Okay, so that's just placing an asset from your library here. Okay, I'm going to skip the tune materials part for now and then move on to this, not this general settings. I don't think you really need to touch this. If we open it, you'll see it's just general settings for Enscape. So, we'll probably want to make sure that we have our grass rendering on for when we do materials, but other than that, it's licensing and language and whatever. But this settings window is key. So if we click on this, then we'll open up the what is the environment control and the image control, right? So you have a few tabs up here that have different sliders, different controls. And if let's maybe make this a little bit bigger. Okay, zoom out a little bit. Okay, set that up. All right, so if we take a look at this model right now, and we just kind of walk through these tabs, we can visualize the differences between these settings. Okay, so notice right now we have a pretty clear render. There's no extra lines. The model is quite clean and almost photoreal, and we could probably play with our glass and add a few mullions, and probably a door would help for this one. um, you know but the overall has a relatively um, real quality to it, and that's just because there are no sketchy lines. Okay, then the materials are quite real, so that gives it the appearance of real. Okay, so, and if you've ever worked in SketchUp, or even, I think I always have the Arctic setting here set up with lines, right? And that's just because as you add these outlines, okay, under style, what you'll get is more of a sketchy SketchUp appearance, right? You'll get this kind of uh, rough, rougher version of it. You'll understand a little bit more that these are just material. Maybe it's not so photoreal, it's more of the material gesture, right? You're just kind of hinting this is going to be a linear wood, this is going to be painted white, and this is going to be a concrete, and this is going to be glass, right? It kind of just says that this is the material palette rather than a photoreal image. So I think that's something to kind of talk about for as you move forward in your how you visualize your geometries, right? Because the more photoreal you get, the more information you have to show, and the more information you have to show, the more design you have to have figured out. Okay, so every time you show something in a render, you kind of have to acknowledge that that thing needs to exist um, someday. Okay, so if you're showing it to a client and they see a chair with a particular fabric, but that fabric doesn't it can't be used on that type of chair, because the manufacturer can't it doesn't have the right stretch qualities or whatever reasons, but that material and that chair can't actually go together in real time and space, which means that is a false image, right? You're selling them something that doesn't exist and can't. So you want to be careful with what you're showing in your renders, so far as materiality and how things are placed and where geometries are. For instance, I think here my beam, I need to figure out how this structure works, right? I just kind of generally slapped some things onto my structure, and I haven't figured them out, right? So I want to be careful how I show this member and how the glass meets this. Um, so it's just things like that, thinking about what exactly you're showing. And I think so. In saying that, this outlines helps to kind of take away that photo realness. It starts to bring the conversation more about these bigger moves and these larger ideas rather than the fine tuning of how exactly this glass is going to meet the structure, because we're not there yet right now. We just want to talk about what this looks like and how it feels and what other maybe openings or distances we want to work with and whatever else. Okay, so that I quite like the outlines for that, and I think you should just remember that when to use them and when not to use them, right? So the next option here under the style then is the mode. So if we look at the mode here and we click on white, give it a second. Okay, so notice everything, even my pretty plant, have turned all white. So in this view, obviously it's called white mode. What we get is a clay render, which is quite kind of nice so far as I can then use this to as a base for shading and bring that into Photoshop and do my own material placement if I'm having trouble with placing the wood or brick or size and etc. So it's a nice option for that. We also have polystyrol, which is again more of a white canvas where it's more, it's quite gray though. And then we have the light view. And what light view is going to do is it's going to give us a kind of, oh, I accidentally pressed that. It's going to give us a kind of, I'm in Enscape space, come on. Okay. It'll give us this like light approximation. Okay, so you can see how the sky is trying, it has some cooler setting, but then the ground has this yellow. And then we look at the building itself. Well, there's you can see that the hard surfaces have this you know light approximation. So what it's doing is it's trying to, it actually has a lux setting where we're visual, quite like literally visualizing just how much light is hitting these surfaces. So we can study the kind of general shading of these interior spaces. I wouldn't do full daylighting studies on this. You can, but you would have to know, I think, a little bit more about your materiality, because there's a, this doesn't, I haven't seen it do reflections very well. So if things are going to reflect into the space, um, I'm not sure I would trust that. I think I would look at something that's some other program. Okay, but it's a nice approximation of it. So if you just kind of want to get a general feel of where that light is going to be, light view works very well. And maybe now is a good time to talk about how to control that light. So if I hold Shift and right click, you'll see those shadows and that light change. Okay, and if you look in the bottom right corner, it says 11 o'clock. Now it's noon. Now it's 1. So I'm moving my mouse to the right as I do this. That is literally changing the time of day. Okay, you can see it's now going into 3, 4, and then if I move back, if I move to the left, I am turning back time. Okay, and I'm now going into the morning. This is again a really nice feature of Enscape is the ability to visualize that change of light throughout the day. Okay, go back to our regular model. We can see the same thing, right? We can see that live update and how that light is going to change in that space. Then as you zoom in, you can, set up one of these views. And once you set up your camera, then you're going to also want to make sure that you have also played with the sun and tried to capture that sun at a very, key point of day. So if there's a particular moment that you want to grab, for instance, um, I would like a contrast probably of this image where we see the light fully through the space, right? We have this dark, light, dark. That's a nice feature of this design. But then we also have this light um, just barely hitting the plant and kind of highlighting this left edge. So it's a nice. It keeps my foreground light, but also my background light. There's a different. There are multiple layers within the same view. And I probably would, so I'd want an image like that, and then I'd probably also take another image with the, the sun more directly facing the facade, right? So things are more aligned. And in this way, I can kind of, get that drama, that dramatic view, right? When things are hypersymmetrical like that, it makes it appear as if, there we go, yeah. It makes it appear as if there's a lot of stuff happening, and your brain automatically likes that symmetry, so it keeps looking at it. Um, so that I think it's a combination, right, of how you set up your camera and how you set up your sun. But it's a nice feature here in Enscape. Okay, so let's go back to our visual settings. I'm getting distracted by how much fun Enscape is. Okay, so we have over here, we have camera settings and we have auto exposure. This is perfectly fine. Usually I've never had to uncheck this. So if you just leave this where it is, it'll be something probably like this. Okay, so if I adjust this, I can still up my exposure, right? I can still increase this, but you want to be careful with how much light you're showing in your model because there is a fine line between what is probably about, right, and then there's things that aren't reality and that make it appear a little too computer animated and just uh, you know, gosh a little bit. It doesn't quite look right. Right? We want to kind of bring that back down and see the materials. Okay, a little bit of brightness is good. You don't want it too dark of render either, right? If you bring this down, you'll get very, very dark. Um, so that's fine for a night render, but just, you'll want to add lights to your model then to do a night render and not just the whole image is dark. Okay, so that's exposure. The next here is projection. Okay, projection has a few options here. We have perspective, which is the standard view here. We have 2-point, right, where we're going to have two points that we have our perspective set to instead of one. And then we have orthographic, which is going to be a parallel view. And again, parallel view, that works really great for diagrams. It also works good for, say, a site isometric image, right, that we had for midterm. This is how you could set that up. Okay, you can go in your Rhino and add the rest of your site, and then show this in that site image view quite quickly for us. Okay, so I'm going to bring that back to perspective. Quite for the render setups, that makes sense. Okay, the next option here is the depth of field. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this up so we can pretty clearly visualize what's happening. So you can see how it's all blurry. Okay, so this is, like a camera setting, right? So you have a depth of field where you're pulling this depth in closer and closer and closer until we're focusing on a particular object. Okay, but as you do this, as you focus on the foreground, everything else becomes quite blurry, and you'd want to do this for a very clear reason, right? To highlight something in particular in the foreground, because then we get blurry. Okay, pull that back down. Focal point, you don't, it's just already set as a focal point, okay? So it's autofocus, which means it will, wherever your camera location is, your camera target will autofocus the camera. The field of view here, this is going to be your lens length, okay? So if you pull that out, you have a wider angled lens, you're getting grabbing more and more of your view, but notice how our model is becoming more and more distorted, okay? So the project geometry is starting to become almost a caricature of itself, right? It's no longer quite accurate, and it's kind of difficult to understand the building. So be careful with these higher field of view settings. Okay, so as you pull this back, um, you're going to, just uh, kind of, making it a little bit more of a drama, I suppose. But, you know, we can also have too much drama, right? We don't want a soap opera for our building. So I'd say about 90 is a good max. And then as you move forward, you can create much more of a flatter, uh, but maybe less dramatic view. Okay, so drama, no drama, drama, no drama. I think that's probably the best way to think about it. Okay, so let's see. Then the last setting here under rendering is the render quality. So we can quite literally change this from what high it should be a default of high to medium to draft view. Okay, and as you're changing these, you'll kind of see that update, right? Um, Not by much though, really. I mean, that's still a pretty. I'd be happy with that as an image for a sketch, to a client. Um, but as you up these, the detail gets finer and finer. Of course, it requires more and more juice from your computer to create that image. So just know what your computer can do, and you know, if it needs to work at medium, it can work at medium. That's it. I think it should be more than fine. Enscape is still it's still a good image. Okay, so long as we can see the materials quite clearly and the texture down here. Okay, so this is the rendering page. If we go to image here, um, here we see quite a few options for just the control of this as a picture. Okay, so if we think of this as just already a JPEG, this is going to control these kind of more Photoshoppy uh, qualities of your image. Okay, so let's just play with them. So we have highlights. Highlights are going to, of course, add more light to the areas with a light. Okay, shadows. Shadows will add more, darkness to the shaded areas, right? A deeper shadow. This will be a lesser shadow. Okay, usually these defaults are perfectly fine, so you don't have to adjust them too much. But say, for instance, here now we have saturation. If you wanted to create a black and white image, then you would pull the saturation completely down. If you wanted to have it hypersaturated, you would pull this way, way up. However, as you do that, notice everything gets saturated in the image, and it kind of gets to be a lot to look at. So, this nice in between is good, or maybe just a slight, for that more sketchy appeal. Again, the same conversation from before where we have the lines showing. Maybe we want to pull back the materiality and just show that as a lighter version of itself. Okay, so something to note. Here we have the color temperature. Okay, so as we slide this up, we'll notice it gets to be more kind of cooler. If we slide it back down, we look at warmer. Okay, so this is using the Kelvin. of our color to adjust these colors in that temperature scale. Okay, cool, warm. Okay, probably good there. All right, so then ambient brightness. This is another good one to note. This is kind of just the general brightness about the image, about the model. Okay, if we turn it down, you'll kind of see these reflections get a little bit darker. Okay, so it's using this kind of um, refraction about the surfaces and your geometry and your materials to create a kind of a brighter um, brighter overall texture. Okay, so ambient brightness is quite nice, just to lighten up a space, that maybe appears a little bit dark inside. Um, okay, so then we have effects. Um, these are I guess they're kind of useful. I don't really bother with these too much, but you can add such things as motion blur, um, lens flare, which is going to be more like you can see the solar flare here, just like in Photoshop, right? Um, oh, maybe it's not my thing. Maybe I need to see the sky. Okay. Then we have bloom. Bloom is going to brighten general. You can see that white starting to get more and more refractive. So it's starting to create a bloom effect about a white surface. We'll also do that with lights, if you have any lights in your model. Okay, so then you have vignette. Vignette is going to create that vignette appearance, right? The dark corners about your image. And then chromatic aberration. I honestly have never used that, and I don't see what it does. So if you know what it is, you can let me know. Um, okay, so I'm going to kind of pull that back, pull this back. We don't really want a vignette. Don't really want much bloom. Lens flare, also don't really want that. And I don't really want motion blur. I don't really like these effects. I feel like they kind of take away from the geometry of the model. So, if you're into that, go for it and play with them. Get good at them. Find out what chromatic aberration is. But yeah, I kind of feel, if it's the architecture, we want to see the architecture. These are all kind of just extra. Okay, so let's move on to these last two. So we have atmosphere. Okay, atmosphere, which is the kind of environment about the project. Okay, so if we take a look at this first option, we can click white background, and then we have this nice abstracted um, floating project, right? That we can just export on a white background and bring that into Photoshop and start to insert it into our own Photoshop site, or use this as a diagram for another piece of our board. Okay, so it's a nice option. Um, we also have fog here, so we can add fog to our render to make it more moody, right? Height, and that will be the height of the fog. So if we want it at a higher elevation, right, that's what this will do. Okay, and then this will be very low. It's just low about the project. You can see that there. Okay, this is the intensity. Bring that back up. Okay, so kind of a nice feature, especially if you have a project, say in a foggy area. If you're in, say, New Mexico, you might not want to add fog to your image. So just be wary of when you're creating this environment, whether or not it's actually the environment for your project. Okay, so the illumination, this is your sun control. So we have our sun brightness, right? We can turn that way up, which gets the kind of a little bit too much. We can also turn it way down. Okay, so it's hard not there. Or this kind of nice general in between. Okay, nice spring day. Night sky brightness. This will be for at night, of course. so you don't really need to do that right now for our day render. Shadow sharpness, again, this is going to be controlling your shadows and how fuzzy they are. Okay, so if we zoom in here, there's a kind of blur between your shadow and the bright area. So if you have your sharpness turned up, that will make it, you can see how it becomes that it takes away that blur, right? It creates a sharper look. So if we turn that down, which you usually would want it something around here, um, just to give it that gentle blur. Okay. Moon size, again, this will be for a night render, but that would increase or decrease your moon size. And then artificial brightness. This is going to be if we have any lights on in our model, this will be the adjuster for how bright that artificial light is inside of the model. Okay, again, works very nicely for, say, a night render or dusk render where we start to see these lights pop on after the sun goes down. Here we have horizon. So we have horizon, we have white ground set up right now. If we start to click through these, we can play a little bit more. We can give it a white cube. So this is like a generic town in the background. Urban, have a generic literal town. Um, town, construction site, mountains, forest. Okay. And then these two are kind of, you know, skybox and clear. They're more for if you have a ground set up and you want just the sky um, for your render. You can also just keep it at white ground too. But the interesting thing is if, say, we'll turn it back to forest, okay, and we use this next slider, which is rotation. You can rotate that that background picture so that it changes, right? It has some different orientation. Okay, so that's kind of nice that you can use that. Notice we don't have any ground or anything set up, so it's not going to appear too much like a very good setting right now. But if we have some sort of environment set up and we can bleed that into the horizon, then we can start to get more of that realistic effect. Okay, so then we have clouds. This is the last little part. This is thinking about your sky, right? If you've ever done the Photoshop version or even the Rhino render version, you can start to you can place your own sky in the background. But when you do that, it kind of has those seams and it gets a little bit tricky to get the lighting just right from where the light is coming in the sky to where it's hitting your model, right? To get all those surfaces to look correct. And what's nice about Enscape is it does that all for you. Okay, so it has your environment about itself, and now all you're doing is adjusting your environment. So if we look at the clouds here, we have the first option, which is density. Okay, so we have more of a clear sky or more clouds. Okay, kind of like to have something around here. Okay, just a few. Then we can also go to the variety. This will change the type of clouds that we're seeing. Okay, so it's kind of more fluffy clouds to kind of a lesser puffy cloud. Cirrus. These are going to change. This is going to add a kind of those higher stratosphere cirrus clouds to our model. Okay, so the lower cumulus, and then we have these higher cirrus clouds that we can turn up and give a little bit more height, elevation uh, to the image. Okay, maybe a little bit much, so you want to be careful with how many clouds you show. So I'd say that's about right. Contrails. I'm not really sure what contrails is. I've never really bothered to use it. Looks like change this. All right, that's another one. If you find out what that does, I've never actually used it, so I'll have to look that up. So then the longitude and latitude, this is going to change the quite literal, the longitude and latitude of the clouds. Okay, so you can change the locations of them. Okay, you're just moving it in kind of an X and Y direction, right? Longitude, latitude. Then here we have this last one. This is going to be capture. Okay, and capture is how you're going to export this image and then use it in another program like Photoshop and or bring it from Photoshop then into InDesign, right? So you're going to want to do some post processing of these images in Photoshop, um, just for more control of materiality and environment, and adding anything else to your image. Okay. So if we look here, we can see there's the resolution setting. This is a key that this is set to ultra. Okay. And usually if you turn these things up to say the highest setting, they will take forever. But in this instance in Enscape, these are so quick still. So I'll go for it, go ultra, and get that high resolution image, so that we can then have a nice, sharp, clean, high res picture to look at for your board. Okay, you don't have to worry about resolution. You can also turn it up to custom and start to really adjust these. So if you know what size your picture is going to be on your board, you can go in here and change this to the pixels that you're going to have it at. Okay, so it's also quite nice. But I'm just going to keep it at ultra for now. Safe frame is the kind of safe frame about the image. We don't really need that right now. And then you'll have here this image export. Okay, so we have the file format that we want it as. So if we say JPEG or PNG, that's usually good. And then we'll have the export. You can export the material ID, the object ID, and the depth of channel. And what's nice about this is it will create a kind of patchwork quilt, I guess, image um, of your same exact image. Okay, so I'm going to click this right now so that when I do save it, we can open it up and you can see what these are. But what these are useful for is overlaying in Photoshop, and then you can just select the material ID color and place any materiality to, that you couldn't get worked out here. You can just place it over in Photoshop, and if you have the material ID set up, it's a very quick select um, for that color rather than having to click and select, the exact area that you're working with. It's just a, few, a work process thing, I guess, workflow. Okay, and then automatic naming, we want to save our as our own name, and then we can ignore the video and panorama for now. Okay, that was almost, I think, um, almost everything. The last little bit, so this is the visual settings. We went through all of this, but the last little bit is really the Enscape capturing toolbar. Okay, so this is going to be the option that you want to choose under Enscape capturing to export that Enscape view. Okay, so if I click on this, um, it's going to give me the file name, and I have to save it as either a PNG or a JPEG or one of these others, but JPEG or PNG. And if I go to my Art 207 class, let's see, we'll go here, and we'll just say that this is test one. Okay. But we'll save this. Remember, I have that material ID saved, so I should be able to give it a second. Oh my, very slow. Oh, it's still rendering, that's why. You can see it here. It's plugging away. Okay. All right. So now maybe I you open up, right click, go to this file location. Mhm. Huh, it's not usually this slow. Okay, we'll let that think. Um, okay, so while we let that think, we'll take a look over here and we can also look at these other options that we have. Okay, these are more video options. Okay, you can see create a 360, create all the video. But so we're going to kind of leave those off. We're not going to do a video right now. But what we can look at is we can note that this one is going to create, it says executable standalone. If I click that, what this will do is it will take this what's kind of the Enscape interface and the saved model of this without any tie to my Rhino model. Okay, so I won't be able to update any geometry. I can't, change materials or environment. I can change the visual settings still in the image because those are Enscape commands, but I I can't edit any more of my architecture once I do this. But if I do this, okay, and it's kind of interesting. If I do this, it will create this little Enscape world that um, I can then send to somebody else, and I can share my Enscape uh, file with anybody. They don't need Rhino. Okay, I can just share this, say, with the client, and they can walk through the model themselves. And I could create a path for them and start to, uh, it kind of create this secondary level of presentation. I mean, you have your image, your presentation, and your um, all of those diagrams that you're making, right? And all these 2D things, but this gives it the secondary interactive layer, um, which is kind of like a video or something, right? We've seen a couple of students do a video, and that's quite nice because it gives it a more realistic factor. Okay, so now I can go. It just needed some time to think, I think. Okay, so if we look at here, we have our PNG files. Okay, so test one, if I double click this and I open it up, what do we see? Okay, so it gives me the JPEG of this, or the PNG, sorry, of the full image as it was, right? With all those settings that I had already set up. Okay. Um, the next image is going to be the framework outside of this. Okay, so it's like I can select this in Photoshop and then delete that background and then work only with my foreground image. Okay, so I can use this as a kind of cutter in Photoshop. Material ID. This is going to be how the layers are set up. Okay, so you can see I had my objects exploded here. So I had different surfaces, um, each with its own material placement, which means I get a different color for each of these things. Again, this is more like post-processing where I can take this into Photoshop and I can select this color. And then once I select that color, I can place another color over that. Okay, and we'll talk about that later, how to use this as a post-processing image. Um, and then object ID, this is based on the object rather than the material. Okay, so it's taking a kind of uniform approach. Okay, so that's one thing that you can export from Enscape and kind of use as a couple things, right? Because you can do the standalone, and then you can also do those secondary images. Okay, so I'm gonna close this Enscape. Okay, and um, I'm going to open up this. You can see how I saved as that. Remember, I exported this as a exe. And what it did was it created this as application file. Okay, if I double click this and open that up, we'll see what that looks like. Okay, so I am now in the standalone model, and notice how it looks pretty darn close to not pretty darn close. I mean, this is it, right? I can't change anything. But this is with all my settings and everything. I can still adjust these things, right? I can still change these to more photoreal and whatever. Change the rendering style. But the cool thing is that this is all in its own interface, and I no longer even need Rhino once I've set this up and exported it. Um, my modeling is done, and now we're off to render world. So, and I can go back and I can continue to set up these things, or I can give this to somebody else to play with without them needing Rhino as an application. Okay, so that's kind of another nice feature. Okay, so I think we have made it through all of Enscape. It's a very very quick program to learn, so it's very powerful, and if you use it, if you use it well, it can be a very helpful resource. So, as you start to iterate and model more and more of these and add things, um, such as materials and objects and room locations, you can start rendering right away. You don't have to wait um, until everything's in place um, to make these renders. You can start rendering from the start and use that image as a tool for you in your design. So you can start looking at where you want your materials, how they should be applied, where your structure is, how is it looking, um, where should there be uh, direct access to things, where's the privacy, where's the publicness. It's kind of like there's a whole bunch of information we're getting here in our renders, and it's up to um, I think it's up to you as a designer to use the good stuff and start to throw away the bad, right? So this is kind of an intermediary image for you to make decisions. Um, and then when you've pushed it as far your design as far as possible, then you can start to work on these exporting high-res images and detailing the site and playing, adding more information to the environment, which we can take a look at a later time. But yeah, that's the basics of Enscape for today. I think then the next time we'll probably take a look at that environment and then also just material setup, material placing on these surfaces, which is similar in any program, any render program. So, we're actually going to use the Rhino render materials, right? We've seen that, but we need to place them on the actual geometry and figure out how we do that. So, okay, I hope that was interesting for you today, and that you've have a little bit better grounding in what Enscape is and how to use it, uh, and when to use it, right? So if you have it downloaded, you have it loaded into your computer, and things are working. There's no reason you can't start pressing the play button from day one and seeing how these things look. It's definitely a visual tool in addition to uh, final pretty render software. So, okay, I'm going to exit out and we'll close out of, oh, I made my background image. I must have really liked that house. Okay, all right, see you next week.